The flame that lifts the hot air balloon skyward does not apologize for its heat. The phoenix does not question its need for transformation. In the same way, the desires that stir within you, calling for change, growth, and a more authentic expression of your being, need no justification beyond their existence. These longings are not distractions from your path, but essential signposts along it, flames that illuminate the way forward when properly understood and channeled. As the first light of dawn transitions to the vibrant reds and oranges of sunrise, so too does the initial spark of transformation develop into something more powerful and sustained. This evolution manifests as desire, a force often misunderstood, frequently suppressed, yet vital to any journey of meaningful growth. Like fire itself, desire is neither inherently constructive nor destructive. Its impact depends entirely on how we relate to and direct its energy. In this chapter, we explore desire as the essential catalyst for transformation, the force that transforms initial awareness into committed action. We'll discover how the dissatisfaction with what is can fuel the creation of what might be, how constructively channeled anger can break through limitations, and how embracing the paradox of readiness allows movement even amid uncertainty. Through understanding and honoring your desires, you forge the vital connection between recognition and realization, between potential and manifestation, between the spark of possibility and the sustained flame of transformation. Our cultural relationship with desire is deeply ambivalent. Spiritual traditions often frame desire as attachment leading to suffering. Consumer culture simultaneously stokes and trivializes our longings. Yet between ascetic denial and mindless indulgence lies a more nuanced truth. Desire, in its authentic expression, serves as the vital energy for growth and becoming. Psychologists distinguish between hedonic desires, focused solely on pleasure and comfort, and eudaimonic desires, which orient toward meaning, growth, and contribution. While both have their place in a balanced life, it is eudaimonic desire that functions as the sustainable fuel for transformation. Research in positive psychology shows that people guided by eudaimonic desires report not only greater fulfillment, but also demonstrate more resilience in facing life's inevitable challenges. The philosopher Spinoza captured this distinction when he wrote of conatus, the inherent striving of all beings not merely to persist, but to flourish according to their nature. This fundamental life force manifests in humans as the desire for self-actualization, for becoming more fully ourselves. It is the same energy that compels the acorn to become an oak or the caterpillar to transform into a butterfly, not an aberration to be overcome, but the essential driver of our evolution. Consider the hot air balloon's relationship with fire. Without the controlled intensity of flame, the balloon remains earthbound, its potential for flight unrealized. Similarly, without the motivating force of authentic desire, our capacity for growth remains dormant, our highest possibilities unexplored. The phoenix, too, requires the heat of transformative fire, not as punishment but as the necessary catalyst for its rebirth and renewal. Our attempts to deny or suppress authentic desires rarely lead to their dissolution. Instead, denied desires often go underground, manifesting in distorted forms: addiction, displacement, projection, or a pervasive sense of emptiness and disconnection. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung observed that what we resist persists, noting how rejected aspects of ourselves don't disappear, but rather gain power from operating in the shadows of our awareness. Neuroscience confirms this understanding, showing that suppression of thoughts and emotions actually increases their influence on behavior while consuming valuable cognitive resources. The brain activity required to continuously suppress desires creates a state of internal conflict that depletes our capacity for creativity, connection, and presence, the very qualities essential for meaningful growth. The balloon that cannot release excess heat becomes unstable. The phoenix that denies its cycle of transformation suffers. In the same way, when we refuse to acknowledge our authentic desires, we create internal pressure that ultimately seeks release, often in ways we neither choose nor control. The challenge lies not in embracing desire itself, but in discerning which desires arise from our authentic nature and which have been imposed by external expectations, cultural conditioning, or compensatory mechanisms for unmet needs. This discernment requires both compassionate self-inquiry and a willingness to sit with discomfort as we examine the roots of our longings. Authentic desires typically share several characteristics that distinguish them from conditioned wants. They emerge from a sense of expansion rather than contraction. They remain stable across time rather than fluctuating with external circumstances. They integrate multiple aspects of self rather than fragmenting our experience. They energize rather than deplete our vital resources. They deepen rather than diminish our connection with others. The balloon rises not because it chases the clouds, but because it responds to its intrinsic relationship with heat and air. Your authentic desires similarly arise not from grasping at external objects, but from honoring the natural direction of your growth and becoming. Take time to explore the nature and quality of your desires through this reflective exercise. In your journal, list several desires that currently feel most compelling in your life, from the seemingly trivial to the profoundly significant. For each desire, explore these dimensions. Physical sensation. How does this desire feel in your body? Where do you feel it? Is there expansion or contraction? Emotional quality. What emotions accompany this desire? Are they primarily positive and negative or mixed? Origin story. When did you first notice this desire? Does it have roots in your early experiences or more recent developments? Future vision. If this desire were fulfilled, how would your life be different? Who would you become? Approach this exercise with curiosity rather than judgment. Like a scientist studying a natural phenomenon, observe the patterns and qualities of your desires, recognizing that understanding precedes wise action. The flame that powers transformation must first be seen clearly before it can be properly directed. Transformation begins not with acceptance, but with a sacred discontent, a recognition that current conditions no longer serve your evolution. This rejection of the status quo isn't petulant complaint or passive cynicism, but rather a clear-eyed acknowledgement that more is possible, that the container you currently inhabit has become too small for your expanding spirit. Psychologists call this state constructive dissatisfaction, a recognition of gap between what is and what could be that motivates positive change rather than despair. Research shows that this form of dissatisfaction, when coupled with a sense of agency and possibility, becomes one of the most reliable predictors of meaningful growth and innovation. History's greatest advances, whether in science, art, social justice, or personal development, have often emerged from this creative tension, this refusal to accept current limitations as final. Einstein's dissatisfaction with Newtonian physics led to relativity theory. Artists throughout time have rejected established conventions to create new forms of expression. Social reformers have refused to accept injustice as inevitable. On the personal level, every significant transformation begins with the courage to say, "This is not enough," or "There must be another way." Like the balloon that must leave the ground to discover the sky, or the phoenix that must release its current form to assume a new one, your growth requires a willingness to question and ultimately move beyond the familiar territory of your existing patterns and circumstances. This dissatisfaction, when properly understood, isn't a problem to solve, but a signal to heed. a message from your deeper self that you're ready for expansion. Psychologist Abraham Maslow noted that the most self-actualized individuals maintained a healthy dissatisfaction even amid achievement, always sensing further possibilities for growth and contribution. The red glow of dawn that beckons the balloon upward. The warm ash that signals the phoenix's readiness for renewal. These are nature's equivalents of your divine discontent, indicators that a new cycle of becoming awaits your conscious participation. What makes the status quo so difficult to transcend isn't merely external resistance, but our own biological and psychological attachment to the known. Our brains are designed to conserve energy by automating familiar patterns and avoiding uncertainty, creating what neuroscientists call the path of least resistance. This evolutionary adaptation served our ancestors well, but can become a significant obstacle to growth in contemporary life. Research in neuroplasticity shows that our brains quite literally form physical pathways of least resistance. Neural networks that become strengthened through repetition, requiring less energy to activate. Changing these patterns requires not just intellectual understanding, but consistent action that creates new neural pathways, a process that initially demands greater energy and attention. This explains why even unsatisfying but familiar states often feel more comfortable than the uncertainty of change. The balloon on the ground experiences no turbulence. The phoenix in its current form fears no flames. Yet this apparent safety comes at the profound cost of unrealized potential. This exercise helps you identify areas where you've outgrown current conditions and are ready for transformation. In your journal, create 3 columns with the headers Area of Life, Current Status, and Growth Edge. List significant domains of your life. Honestly assess their current state and articulate what feels restricted or outgrown in each area. Review your inventory and circle where the gap between current status and potential growth feels most energetically charged. For each circled area, write, "I am no longer willing to accept," followed by the specific limitation you're ready to transcend. This inventory transforms vague dissatisfaction into focused awareness. Among the emotions that signal readiness for transformation, anger is perhaps the most misunderstood and maligned. Psychologists distinguish between reactive anger and what might be called sacred anger, the righteous indignation that arises when important values are violated or authentic needs denied. Research shows that constructively channeled anger activates the approach centers in the brain, increasing motivation and goal-directed behavior. Unlike fear, which triggers avoidance, appropriately expressed anger enhances problem-solving capacity. Throughout history, significant positive changes have often been initiated by justifiable anger that refuse to accept unjust conditions. The key lies in transforming anger's raw energy through acknowledgement, clarification, intention, channeling, and integration. This process mirrors how the phoenix doesn't deny the transformative fire, but consciously enters it with purpose and vision. Exercise. Constructive anger channeling. This practice helps transform the potentially volatile energy of anger into a constructive force for change. First, identify a situation in your life that consistently triggers justifiable anger, where important values are violated or authentic needs denied. Find a private space where you can safely express this anger physically without harming yourself or others. This might involve vigorous movement or exercise, vocalization like shouting into a pillow, symbolic expression such as writing a letter you don't send, or physical release through squeezing a stress ball or striking a punching bag. After this initial release, sit quietly and ask yourself, what specific value or need is being violated in this situation? What is this anger trying to protect or create? What constructive change would address the root issue? From this centered awareness, identify 3 specific actions you could take that would honor the legitimate concern your anger has identified, create positive movement toward addressing the underlying issue, and channel the energy of anger into constructive change. Choose one action to implement within the next 24 hours, consciously carrying the transformed energy of your anger into this constructive step. Through this practice, anger becomes not an obstacle to growth but a powerful ally, providing the initial thrust needed to overcome inertia and create meaningful change. Like the intense red flame at the heart of transformation, anger, properly channeled, illuminates what matters most and provides the energy to protect and advance it. The paradox of readiness, beginning before you feel ready. Perhaps the most persistent myth about transformation is that we must feel fully prepared before beginning. We wait for perfect conditions, complete clarity, or absolute certainty, states that rarely, if ever, arrive. This waiting becomes a sophisticated form of resistance, keeping us perpetually on the threshold of change without crossing over into new territory. The truth, paradoxical yet liberating, is that readiness is not a prerequisite for beginning, but rather a capacity that develops through the very act of starting. Like learning to swim, certain understandings can only emerge through engagement, not contemplation. The balloon never fills completely while tethered to the ground. The phoenix cannot know the full extent of its renewal before entering the transformative fire. This understanding is supported by research in behavioral psychology showing that action often precedes rather than follows motivation. Studies consistently demonstrate that waiting for emotional readiness before taking action creates a self-reinforcing loop of inaction, while taking small steps despite uncertainty generates both motivation and capacity for larger movements. The psychologist Ellen Langer captures this principle in her concept of premature cognitive commitment. Our tendency to believe we must fully understand something before engaging with it, when in fact engagement itself is often the most direct path to understanding. The Threshold Guardian. In mythological terms, this paradox represents what Joseph Campbell called the threshold guardian, the apparent obstacle that stands between the hero and the beginning of their journey. The guardian's function is not to prevent passage, but to ensure that only those committed enough to face uncertainty are granted entry to the path of transformation. Your own threshold guardian often appears as the voice of doubt, the illusion of unreadiness, or the belief that more preparation is needed before beginning. Recognizing this resistance not as truth but as a natural part of the growth process allows you to honor its presence while still taking that crucial first step. The red light of dawn doesn't wait for the perfect moment to appear. It emerges through the darkness, gradually illuminating what was obscured. Your journey begins in similar fashion, not with complete clarity but with the courage to move toward what calls you, allowing understanding to emerge through engagement. Exercise the inspired incomplete step. This practice helps you move beyond the readiness paradox by taking meaningful action before feeling fully prepared. 1. Identify an important growth direction or change you've been contemplating but haven't yet begun due to feeling unprepared or uncertain. 2. On a scale of 1 to 10, honestly assess how important this change is to your authentic growth, how ready you actually feel to begin. 3. If your readiness score is lower than your importance score, acknowledge that this gap is normal and expected, not a sign that action should be delayed. 4. Now, identify what you're calling readiness in this situation. What specifically do you believe needs to be in place before you can begin? 5. For each requirement, ask yourself, is this truly necessary before taking any step, or could it develop through action? Is this requirement serving as protection, or as a form of resistance? What might become possible if I began without this condition being fully met? 6. Design a single, inspired, incomplete step, an action that is small enough to take immediately without further preparation, is meaningful enough to represent genuine movement toward your goal, acknowledges that you're beginning before feeling completely ready. 7. Commit to taking this step within the next 24 hours, not because you feel ready, but because the journey matters enough to begin imperfectly. This practice honors the paradox of readiness while preventing it from becoming a barrier to growth. Like the balloon that must eventually be untethered despite uncertain winds, or the phoenix that must trust the wisdom of its renewal cycle, you learn to begin not when all conditions are perfect, but when the call to growth becomes more compelling than the comfort of waiting. At the heart of every significant transformation lies an encounter with fear. Not the absence of fear, which is rarely possible or even desirable in meaningful growth, but rather a new relationship with fear that allows forward movement despite its presence. This relationship transforms fear from an obstacle into a companion on the journey, an indicator of the edge where growth becomes possible. When we reframe fear as activation for change rather than warning of danger, the very sensations that once held us back become fuel for forward movement. The fire that might burn can also illuminate. The winds that create turbulence also enable flight. This exercise helps transform fear from obstacle to ally in your growth journey. 1. Identify a specific fear that has been limiting your movement toward authentic growth. Write about this fear in detail, giving voice to its concerns and protective intentions. 2. Physically embody this fear by adopting a posture that represents how this fear feels in your body. Notice the sensations, tensions, and energy patterns associated with this state. 3. While maintaining awareness of these sensations, gradually shift your posture to one that feels more expansive, grounded, and capable, not denying the fear but creating space around it. 4. From this more resourceful state, engage in a written dialogue with your fear, addressing it directly. Acknowledge its protective intention. I understand you're trying to keep me safe by. Express appreciation. Thank you for your concern about. Set a boundary. I hear your warning, and I'm choosing to move forward anyway because. Offer reassurance. We can approach this edge together, and I'll be attentive to genuine danger without being stopped by discomfort. 5. Conclude by identifying one specific action you will take that honors both the legitimate concern your fear has highlighted and your commitment to growth despite uncertainty. This practice doesn't eliminate fear, but transforms your relationship with it, creating the possibility of courageous action in its presence. Like the balloon pilot who respects the power of unpredictable winds while still navigating through them, or the phoenix that acknowledges the intensity of transformation while embracing it. You learn to honor fear's message without being defined by its limitations. As we conclude our exploration of desire as catalyst, we return to a fundamental truth. The longings that stir within you are not accidents or distractions, but essential aspects of your growth journey. Properly understood and channeled, desire creates the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming, between the potential recognized in awakening and its manifestation through sustained transformation. Like the heat that transforms the balloon from inert fabric to soaring vessel, or the fire that enables the phoenix's magnificent renewal, desire provides the essential energy for your extraordinary growth. Without this catalytic force, insights remain theoretical, possibilities remain unexplored, and the spark of transformation remains a momentary flicker rather than a sustained flame. The red thread that weaves through authentic desire connects you to the deepest currents of your being, not the superficial wants of the conditioned self, but the essential longings of your authentic nature seeking expression. By honoring these desires, rejecting the limitations of the status quo, channeling anger's transformative potential, and moving beyond the paradox of readiness, you activate the full power of desire as catalyst for your continuing journey. As you prepare to explore the foundations of your being in the next chapter, carry forward this understanding. Desire is not the enemy of growth, but its essential ally. The fire within you seeks not to consume, but to transform, not to destroy, but to illuminate, not to separate, but to integrate all aspects of your being into more complete expression. The flame is lit. The journey has begun. The transformation continues. As we transition to exploring the foundations of being, take a moment to integrate the key insights from this chapter through a specific commitment. First, reflect on which aspect of desire as catalyst resonated most deeply with your current growth edge. Understanding desire as positive force, rejecting limitations of the status quo, channeling anger constructively, moving beyond the readiness paradox, facing fear while embracing change. Second, for the area you selected, articulate one specific practice or action that you commit to implementing in the coming week, something concrete and measurable that represents a meaningful step in your transformation journey. Third, schedule this commitment in your calendar or daily practice, giving it the same priority you would give to any important appointment or obligation. Fourth, identify a simple way to acknowledge your follow-through, creating positive reinforcement for this step in your growth journey. This integration practice ensures that the insights from this chapter become not merely interesting ideas, but living forces in your ongoing transformation. Like the balloon that must eventually leave the ground to discover its capacity for flight, or the phoenix that must enter the flames to experience renewal. Your growth requires not just understanding, but action. The courageous step that converts potential into lived reality. In the chapter that follows, we'll explore the essential foundations that support sustainable transformation, the underlying structures that enable your continued growth and evolution. But first, honor the catalyst that has already begun its work within you, the sacred desire that calls you toward your most authentic expression and extraordinary becoming.